Thank you, Nikki. No pressure whatsoever. But it is true, like this message in particular, I've had a little bit longer than usual to prepare, but I've really, really struggled with it. Because I had this, we've entered a new season, and I had this question about the new season, and so I've spent probably 3-4 weeks just listening to messages, reading commentaries, but I just couldn't find an answer to it. So you know how Stephen had Psalm 126, and verse 5 says, so if you could put the PowerPoint on, thank you very much. Those who sow in tears will reap with shouts of joy. And we have agreed as a congregation, we have entered a new season. We have been through the season of tears, and now we've entered the season of joy. Yeah. And I don't know about your experience so far for this year, but maybe you've had a brilliant experience, work's been pure joy, your finances have been no struggle whatsoever, everyone's loving you, and no one's been upset with you. Maybe. But for me, I have to say, like, the year hasn't started any different to any other years, maybe a little bit worse. So when last Sunday, Edgar mentioned it before, when he called people forward who were weary, like we had at least half the church come forward. So which makes me wonder, like, we do believe we have entered a season of joy and harvest. So is this, like, what's up with this season? Like, what's wrong with it? So it made me wonder, do we have the right expectations? Do we have the wrong expectations of the new season? Or, like, is it a little bit early? It's like one of those things where God makes a promise and you have to wait for another 12 years until something happens. So I listened to different things, and no message really addressed what I was asking, but I did come across one comment, and I can't remember if I put that up or not. Click, click, click. It's on. It's green. But I'm not even sure if can you go back? Like, that's, yeah, I didn't put that on. Anyway, so the comment that caught my attention was, this one pastor was saying, a new season requires a new mindset, because if you don't bring a new mindset into the new season will soon feel a whole lot like the old one. And it made me think, okay, so like it makes sense, new mindset, but does that actually mean that it's like positive thinking, nothing much really changes, and we just try and see everything in a positive light? Because that's not good enough for me either. When Israel, let's quickly go to the Old Testament, when when Moses freed Israel from slavery, they circled the desert for 40 years for a journey that should have taken them, like if you go from point A to point B, should have taken them about 2 weeks. Now, in their 40th year of being in the desert, they come to Mount Seir, which is a mountainous region in today's Jordan area. And here God says this to Israel. So now let me try again. Oh no, it's off. Here, why do I turn it on? On the side. I've used this numerous times, mind you. Okay. Ha! And here he says to Israel, you have circled this mountain long enough, now turn north. So after circling the desert for 40 years and really making no progress, God says turn north, which really means the time in the desert is finished. Now I want you to head straight towards your promised land, the one that I've promised you, the land that is flowing with milk and honey. And the thing is, within a year, Israel actually settled in their promised land. Now, when God told Israel to turn north, it actually meant a shift in mindset, a shift in focus, literally because they actually had to turn it to a different direction and head a different direction. but also mentally and spiritually, because they were used to circling the desert over and over again and not getting anywhere. Now they knew God is actually leading us to the promised land. We're going to get there, and they did. So the question for us is, do we need to change our mindset too for the new season? And as a church, because I've been reflecting on that, as a church, it has felt a little bit over the last 7 years, certainly, like we've circled the same problems, the same mountain over and over again. And, we've addressed issues that have come up, be it with attendance or be it with, and attendance has gone up and down and up and down, and no matter what we've done. Or be it sometimes we thought about the building, is it too small? Whatever strategies we've used, we didn't really seem to make any headway, and the same problems kept coming up again and again. And for you personally, maybe you've had issues in your life where you kind of felt like you're circling the same problem over and over again. You're trying different ways, but you're not making any headway. In this new season, if we have entered a new season, like Israel, if we shift our focus, we should be able to expect that now the season has changed, we're actually going to get there. Now, Edgar's spoken about the North Georgia revival. I don't know, like for those of you who were here, so maybe you remember. But for the last 5 years, the church has experienced revival. It's called the Christ Fellowship Church. They've experienced a really heavy presence of God in their church, and people that have come to their church have been healed, like they have a lot of healings, documented healings. So they have actually entered what I would describe as a season of harvest, a season of joy, a new season, because it wasn't always like this. Before that revival started, the pastor, Todd Smith, says that his congregation was probably about our size, 120 to 140 people attendance, or maybe even a little bit smaller. They were worshiping in this huge complex, 2,000-seater, and no matter what he did, they tried all sorts of different strategies, circling the same mountain over and over again, trying and trying. And he said, people would join their church, but others would leave again. And so in the end, they would never have any more than they've had for years and years and years, no matter what they tried. And so he was asking the question, let me quote it. What's wrong with me that we're not bearing fruit? Like that's what he says, that we're not growing. So he thought, I'm trying everything, I just can't change, there's no progress. And so he was so depressed, preaching in front of a church that was 80% empty, that he got to a point where he's like, obviously I'm no good, I'm not doing any good, so I resign. And he actually handed in his resignation to the church leadership. After he'd done that, he spent some time in prayer, and let's backtrack. Before he went to pray, well, he probably prayed anyway, but after that, he got a phone call from someone he'd never met before, was an American evangelist, and again, that evangelist had never met him before, and that guy says to him, look, I had a dream about you, and I saw you in a dark room with your hands up in the air, like resigning and wanting to quit ministry. And God has a message for you. And the message is, do not quit, keep going. And so he's like, hey, obviously that he took that to be a word from God, so he took his resignation back. And then he spent some time in prayer, and God spoke to him very clearly in a way that he had never done before. He had this vision of his church, and he saw the baptismal font, and all of a sudden there was fire on the baptismal font, and he wasn't entirely sure what it meant, but God told him that he would come to their church and his presence would reside there. So that's when the church entered a new season. They didn't change anything, didn't change strategies except for one thing, that they established more times of prayer, but we'll get back to that a little bit later. But the presence of God came to the church and was so heavy that he says you can actually feel it stepping into, it's like a different atmosphere. They have immersed about 30,000 people so far in the baptismal font, and they have had, he said, a whole stack of documented healings. So the things that they had prayed for years and years and years, all of a sudden they happened, and they hadn't changed anything. They didn't labor anymore. It just, God came in and did it. Like with the Israelites, God came in and said, turn north, I'm going to lead you there now. But I just wanted to give you some examples, because it's just encouraging, of what happened at that church. So he said there was a 9-year-old boy, and he had almost no sight, so he hopped in the car with his family, and they traveled there. They immersed him. He came out of the baptismal font, and had wood everywhere, so he's rubbing the water out of his eyes and his ears, and as he opens his eyes, he realizes he can actually see out of his left eye. Then a lady in one of the churches they visited, so it doesn't just happen at their own church, but when they take a group, go to a different church and minister, stuff happens as well. So one lady needed a hip replacement. She goes in the baptismal font, comes out. The next day she goes to the doctor to verify that they were going to replace her hip, or when. And the doctor said, well, I don't really know what happened, but your hip is perfect. Another lady with leukemia came to be immersed, and she had lost about 50 pounds. She couldn't eat anything anymore. She was just drinking juices. So she was immersed, came back out. The next day she goes to the doctor, and they did some tests, and the doctor said, look, I don't know, something's wrong with our machines. Can you please come back the next day, the following day, we'll do some more tests. They do the tests, and he goes, I can't explain it, but you're perfectly healthy. Another lady, Lorraine, had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. So this is the scan before she went into, so she came to the church too. This is the PT scan before she went into the water. All those little dark spots are lesions. She had over 50 cancer lesions in her body, and she said they stopped counting after 50. That's her as she's going into the font. So she goes in, she was out in the spirit, and then as she came back up, and she had an experience where God was speaking to her, singing to her. As she came back up, she realized she was no longer in pain. So the very next day, she goes to the doctor, and that's the scan. Like all the lesions were gone, and those dark spots are healthy spots. They just happened to show up too. But like all the lesions were gone, she was perfectly healthy. And that's her after that. Then they had a girl come to be immersed, and she said that she had been cutting. They took a photo before. She went under, came back up, and Todd Smith said as she came up, they could actually watch the scars disappear. This is a photo after. So these things happened, and it wasn't because they labored, did anything different, but because it was time, the season had changed, God came in, he did it. Now, when Israel turned north, they changed their perspective and they entered the promised land within the same year. So from our side, okay, God is doing it, but from our side, does changing our perspective actually do something? Does it affect our reality or who we are? Proverbs 23:7 says, for as he thinks in his heart, so he is, or so is he. And Romans, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So according to these verses, our mindset does something to us. It changes us. Now, our mindset, that's our beliefs, our values, our attitudes towards ourselves and towards the world around us. they kind of they shape how we experience the world. And when we change our mindset, it has an effect on our actions, how we respond to the things that are happening to us and around us. Now, there's growing evidence, scientific evidence, that our thoughts actually have an influence on our bodies. And I love the Bible because the stuff you can find in the Bible, you can actually often back up with scientific research. So, and I love that. So it's like, see, already says in the Bible. But there was this Harvard psychologist, and she did some experiments with maids. Now, these maids, they were, like going up the stairs, going down the stairs, vacuuming, like they actually did physical work, except 70% of these maids, they thought, I'm not really doing any exercise. I'm just working, and then I'm too tired to go home and exercise. Now, she told half the group that what they did actually qualified as heavy exercise, as being quite active. The other part of the group was not given that information. So a month later, they tested all their health statistics, and they discovered that the group that was told that they were exercising, they had a 10% drop in blood pressure, they lost weight, and they lost inches around the waist. The other group did not. So what the conclusion was that what we believe, like if you believe you're exercising, your body adjusts as if you are. So what we speak over ourselves, what we believe actually affects us. Let's go a step further. Do our thoughts affect our reality? Yes. Okay, well, let's move on.
I mean, you can elaborate, but the short.
I will elaborate with another experiment, and that's in France, and it was done with wine. Of course, being French, you have to experiment with wine. So this one guy, university, was he a university? A scientist. But at the University of Bordeaux, he conducted these experiments with, one was where he took white wine, and he colored, put 2 glasses, 1 glass stayed white, the other one he colored with red food coloring, and then he had 57 wine experts taste the wine. None of them picked up it was white wine, and they all described the wine in red wine jargon, which I don't know what it is, but the second experiment was where he took a medium Bordeaux, so it wasn't super expensive, wasn't super cheap, medium quality Bordeaux, and put it in 2 different bottles. One was a very expensive looking bottle, the other one was a very cheap looking bottle, like a cheap table wine. And guess what? None of them picked up on it. The wine in the expensive bottles was described as agreeable, complex, balanced, rounded, and exactly the same wine in cheap bottles was called weak, short, flat, faulty. So wine experts. So, which they took to mean, like, if we think we taste expensive wine, our reality is we taste expensive wine. So our thinking and beliefs affect how we perceive our reality. And the thing is, we act out of that. So like our actions come out of that. Dr. Caroline Leaf, some of you may have read her books. She says, as we think, we change the physical nature of our brain. So like if we keep thinking the same thoughts, it becomes natural to us. As we consciously direct our thinking, we can wire out toxic patterns of thinking and replace them with healthy thoughts. That means we can choose to have thoughts and beliefs that actually help us get where we want to go. And because our different beliefs about reality will, we will act differently out of that and contribute to, reaching that goal. And that's, I think, an important insight in this season. We interpret what happens to us through the lens of our mindset. And if we, like with this season, if we believe nothing has changed, anything that happens to us we'll interpret from that lens. But if we believe, like, yes, the season has changed, we will interpret the events or the things that are happening to us differently. We might see them as opportunities, or, like, do we think of a problem that comes as something that is holding us back from achieving what we want to achieve? Or do we think it's not a big deal? Or do we think it's an opportunity? No, it's a stepping stone. It'll help me get where I want to go. Old Testament has lots of stories, and an example story for that too. So in Genesis 37 following, it tells us about Joseph. Now, Joseph is a 17-year-old kid. He's the darling of his dad, which his 11 brothers don't like very much at all. So they kind of hate him. And then Joseph has this dream where God tells him, look, your family will bow down to me, bow down to you. So he tells his family the dream, and they get really upset, and his brothers plot to murder him. They end up not murdering him, but selling him to a caravan. They take him to Egypt, and here he is accused of rape falsely, ends up in prison. But then he, at the age of, 13 years later, at the age of 30, he basically becomes what would be the prime minister of Egypt. It's a really important position. He forgives his brothers. And he says in Genesis 50:20, you intended to harm me, he's speaking to his brothers, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Oops, I have these two. Yep. So he interpreted these challenges not as, okay, it's going to hold me back from my purpose in life. He actually says, no, God used it all, there were stepping stones. And he wouldn't have ended up if he hadn't been sold, if he hadn't been in prison. So we believe, okay, we are in a season where we see promises fulfilled, where we see our prayers answered, but it doesn't mean there won't be any challenges. The Hebrew word for north, in Deuteronomy where it says turn north, God says turn north, the Hebrew word for north is saphon, and saphon means secret or hidden. Now, heading north for the Israelites meant heading towards the unknown. Before, they had been circling in the desert, and you do the same thing over and over again, it can become comfortable, but you're not getting anywhere either. So when they stopped circling and doing the comfortable thing, they actually headed towards the unknown. So it was, uncharted territory. But it wasn't just that. Saphon north was feared by the Israelites because this is where their enemies were, and the enemies would often attack from the north. And as they headed north, they actually headed into enemy territory. So there were the Ammonites, the Moabites, and Amorites, and others. So they had to cross the land to get to the promised land. So entering a season of joy does not necessarily mean there won't be attacks, or there won't be the enemy, or there won't be challenges. And I very naively thought at the start of the year, it's all going to be hunky-dory, everything is going to fall into place. No worries, but yes, I have changed my mind on that, and I think, unfortunately, we still will have challenges, but we know we're headed towards, or God is leading us towards, having the prayer answered, and it's actually going to happen in this season. So, yes, combining that with our mindset, I think it is important how we look at different things, how we look at problems, how we look at those challenges. Are they going to help us, or are they going to be a hindrance? According to psychological research, you can only think one thought at a time. So if you're thinking a negative thought, you can't think a positive thought. If you're thinking a positive thought, you can't think a negative thought, which means, if problems or challenges come, do you think of them as a negative thing, or as a positive thing, like you actually have a choice to make. Do I choose to think of it as a positive thing? And then you will act out of that. C.S. Lewis said, the great thing, if one can, is to stop regarding all the unpleasant things as interruptions of one's own real life. The truth, of course, is that what one calls interruptions are precisely one's real life, the life God is sending us day by day. So how we think about a challenge will actually affect our reality. What we believe about a problem will determine how it impacts our life. And under God's directive, under his leadership, the challenges in life can become opportunities or stepping stones towards where he wants to bring us. Genesis 39:23 says, the Lord was with Joseph and God gave him great success in whatever he did. So Joseph came to his place of influence because he had God in his life. He focused on God, he relied on God, and God was actually speaking to him. In Genesis 41:16, he says to Pharaoh wants an answer about the dream that he's had, and Joseph says, look, I don't know, but God knows, and he's going to talk to me, and then I can tell you. So he was communicating with God. And when Israel turned north, they started listening to God. And as they were facing new challenges, God would speak to them and give them specific instructions how to counter each challenge. He would say, like God said, give these people these orders as they were headed north, give them these orders. And then at each junction, he would give them orders like, pass through this land, but do not provoke the people because, you won't beat them. And so they did. Or he would say, take possession of the land, battle them, and you will conquer them. And they did. And as Israel listened to God and followed his instructions, they conquered the enemy and reached the promised land. So in this new season, what I take away from this is we can actually hear God speak. God will speak to us in ways that he hasn't done before. Now, in North Georgia, when the revival happened, Todd Smith heard from God in a way that he'd never heard before, quite clearly. And that's why Todd Smith makes the point, and that's what I mentioned before about prayer is so important for them now, because he says, in that season, we need to be still before God. We need to listen to him. And it's not about that prayer time is not about asking for things. That's the previous season. I mean, there will still be things that you're sometimes asking for, but the laboring is finished now. It's about drawing near, hearing from God so that we can head towards our promised land. For our church, I'm not entirely sure what this new territory is. I think with all the prophetic words that we have had in the past, like from Suzette Hatting and what's the new South African guy, I forget his name. Eddie and Blom, and others, they have given us words like that our church would be open 24/7, presence of God would be really heavy in here, and there also would be healings like in the North Georgia Revival. So it can look something like this. And you personally, reflect what's your personal new territory. Is it, do you, what have you been hoping for? What have you been praying for? In this new season, we do expect it's going to happen. There will be challenges, but God will speak and lead you to it. So that's why, especially connecting with God, that's why as a congregation we have focused on the importance of prayer. So, we've got our Sunday morning prayer on a Sunday morning, but we've also now, Nikki mentioned it before, this new slot where we just want to draw close to God without asking anything, just sitting there and hearing from God. I'm going to finish with another testimony and then just, recap what I think about this new season. And it's an older one, but I think it reflects what it can look like for one person. We've had a church that has entered a new season, so this is what it looked like for them. but what can it look like for one person to enter a new season? And this testimony is by Don Piper. So like you may have read his books. He wrote one book, 90 Minutes in Heaven. So he's a Baptist minister. He was at a conference, and then driving home from the conference, I think he had a Bible study to go to. The weather turned cold, and started drizzling, and because it was so cold, it actually started freezing on the road. And so he gets to this bridge and just drives across, and the semi-trailer comes towards him, swerves into his lane, and hits him full on. And he says all 9 wheels squashed his car and came over him. He says the steering wheel was impaled in his chest, the dashboard collapsed on his legs. And he also says he was actually dismembered. Part of his left leg and his left arm were on the back seat. So he dies, and he has an experience of heaven. And as he gets to heaven, there's different parts. I just want to focus on part quickly where he has a welcoming committee, and he realizes all these people, partly it's family members, partly it's other people, but they all have had an impact on his faith. This is his welcoming committee, and he says it was just wonderful to see them all there. So, but he is dead for an hour and a half. What happened in the meantime is that paramedics arrived, and they checked him out, and they're like, no, he's dead. But then a friend of his, or another Baptist pastor who had been at the same conference, travels back with his wife. They come across the scene of the accident and get out, and Dick is the name of the guy. He has a very strong sense that he needs to pray for that dead man, like he doesn't know who he is. And it's kind of not what he usually does. So he's asking the paramedics. Paramedics go, no, the guy's dead, you can't go near. But he insists until he can actually go close, and they warn him. It looks really gruesome. But he starts praying for him. And in the meantime, the wife is alerted, other Christians, they're all praying. And he starts singing a song, and all of a sudden, the dead man sings along. So, he rushes to the paramedics, kind of goes look, the guy is alive. They go, no. Can you please check him out? No. So he said, in the end, he had to lie down in front of the ambulance, and so they couldn't leave. And then they went and checked him out, and yes, indeed, he was alive. They bring him to the hospital, and the doctors go, he's so messed up, he's not going to survive. But he did. He was in hospital for 6 months. He had, 34 surgeries and 2 years of physiotherapy. And even after that, he had to, that leg thing where they screw the metal bits through your bones. He had that for a long time and was in pain a lot. And so he said, after his accident, he was very angry. He suffered acute depression because you kind of know life will never be the same. This is a new season. Probably not a very joyful one, but it's a new season. Someone, he said, brought him a plaque with Psalm 46:10 on it, which says, "Be still and know that I am God." And that became his focus. At first he thought, that's a little bit, is that sarcastic? Because he couldn't move at all, be still. But it actually became his focus. Being still before God, tuning into God, hearing from Him. And he says, at one point, he obviously, you get angry at God still. And he said he heard the audible voice of God. And I quote what Don said, God said to him. So God said, just the guy has been run over by a semi-trailer, he's in pain, he's had a lot of operations. This is what God says. This is not about you, it's about me. What I can do through you now, I could never do before the truck ran over you. But I can imagine God saying that to you. It's yeah, thank you. And God goes on, you need to get over your pity party. And you need to stop shaking your fist at me. And you need to take the same hand and reach out to other people because you'll understand how they feel. And Don also hears God say that God's plan for him is to live a full life, not to live in misery, and to use the opportunities, like the challenges, turn into opportunities in this new period in his life to expand his ministry. And so he said at one point, like he just realized he could mourn what he had lost or accept that this was actually the new normal for him, a new season, and to think of the problems and disappointments as opportunities, as God appointments, he calls them. God turned his disappointments into God appointments. So he stopped asking, why, God, did you let this happen to me, to how can I use these opportunities? And that experience, that's why I mentioned it before with the welcoming committee also, he says, like, it just made me realize that this life is short, and sometimes we lose perspective. Like, the bigger perspective is, like, we look towards our true north, our God, and we look towards heaven, and everything is leading up to that. So for him, it has become even more important to reach out to people and to bring as many people as he can with him to heaven. So now I'm reflecting on this and I'm thinking it's probably not an event, an accident like that where you kind of go, new season of joy. Yeah, it's awesome. But for him, it actually, like, the event itself was horrible and devastating at first, but it did set off a season of joy because he said he did find joy in ministering, like he found his perspective, what is really important in life. And it opened opportunities to him that he otherwise would have never had. Like, he always wanted to serve in ministry and have a successful ministry. But with the new season, it meant that he actually ended up ministering in 50 states in the US. He ministered and spoke to thousands of people overseas. He wrote 5 books. His book, 90 Minutes in Heaven, was on the New York bestsellers list. They made it into a movie. He has literally, and his books, I think, were sold just under 10 million copies. So he literally ministered to millions of people, and he was able to speak to people that were really suffering because he had been through the same type of suffering, and they could take it from him. So by the way, he's 74 and still ministering. So the year may have not started off very promising, and like maybe it has felt a little bit like it's the same old season. We were trying, exactly the same problems, not getting anywhere, but let me encourage you, it is a new season. And in this new season, like, we can trust it is going to be a season of joy and harvest. And this season, God tells us to change our perspective, to turn north, to turn towards him and the promise that he's given us, and expect that he's going to get us to our promise. Like, so for this season, expect the promise. Like, it won't be without challenges, but these challenges God can turn into opportunities in this new season. And expect for God to speak in ways that he has never spoken to us before, clearer than ever before, because we need to listen to him, stay tuned into him, that we can head towards our promise, and now we're going to get there. Amen. I may just pray into that before we head into Holy Communion, and just pray that it really sinks into our hearts. And, like this morning, like Edgar said with my mom, it threw me a bit, because like so I get the email, literally as I was just quickly looking over my message for this morning, get the email that she's back in hospital. And like, because I'm the only daughter, I don't know what that entails. Do I have to fly over? Do I have to arrange, for carers? So it threw me a bit, but again, you're kind of going, no, I'm speaking on this. So this too, like, God has got it. I turn towards him, I look towards him, I trust him that he is going to work it all out, and that whatever challenge I may be facing is actually an opportunity, a stepping stone. So whatever is going, and I mean, there's been other stuff happening during the week, so whatever has happened for you this last week, whatever challenge, Give it to God and trust He's going to turn it into a stepping stone and opportunity to get you to where you're meant to be. So Lord, I pray for Living Grace. I pray for each individual, each family, that you would help us change our direction. Lord, you're telling us to turn north. We want to turn north towards you. You are true north. Lord, we want to change our mindset to know that this is a new season. It is going to be a season of joy. It is going to be a season of harvest. And like Israel, when they turned north, within a year they had received the promise. This is our season. We trust you. We love you, Lord. We're so thankful that we have you in our lives. And we do ask you that as we draw near to you in this new season, that you would speak to us, that you would speak to us as Living Grace and individually in ways you have never done before. Praise your name, Lord, and I ask for your anointing and for your blessing on this season, on each one of us. Amen.